All right, very good. Welcome, everybody. This is the Monday, April 18th listening session for the Portland City Council. I will go ahead and turn this right over to our incredible moderator, Jen Gray O'Connor. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Mayor Wheeler. Welcome everyone to our second community listening session on the city's fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. So this evening, community members will have the opportunity to provide testimony to the council on issues that they want to see addressed in the city's upcoming budget. Just to provide you an overview of our agenda tonight, we're going to start by giving you an overview of our rules of conduct for this evening. And then council will have the opportunity to give us some opening remarks. Then we'll have a budget 101 from Budget Director Jessica Kennard to kind of ground our discussion, followed by some invited community testimony, and then community testimony on any topic. Then we'll close our evening with some remarks from council and Mayor Wheeler, and then I'll remind everyone all of our great opportunities to have additional opportunities to hear from the public. So just to provide that up front, we're still going to have 2 more sessions for folks to be able to provide testimony. The next one is going to be Thursday, May 5th, and that will also be from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. That's the mayor's proposed budget hearing. Then on Wednesday, May 11th, from 1 to 5 p.m., you'll have the approved budget hearing. But at any time, you can also provide online testimony at portlandoregon.gov/CBO or email the budget office at budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. So before we get started, I'm just going to provide 2 notices. The first is an explanation of our electronic meetings notice. So under Portland City Council and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of council are attending remotely by video and by teleconference. The city has made several avenues available for the public to listen to this audio broadcast this evening. So the meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, which is eGovPDX, or at www.portlandoregon.gov/video and on channel 30. The public can also provide written testimony to council on the budget at the budget office website, which is portlandoregon.gov/CBO, and by emailing the budget office at budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact to promote social distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience and flexibility, as well as understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to do the city's business. Tonight, I want to ground us with some rules of conduct. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. And so the presiding officer preserves order and decorum during the City Council meeting so that everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in the meeting, participants applied to give testimony online. So if you did not apply to give testimony, you can do so by submitting in writing at portlandoregon.gov/CBO. So when testifying, please state your name for the record, but your address is not necessary. Declare if you are a lobbyist, and if you're representing an organization, please identify it. You have 2 minutes to testify, and you'll be timed by staff. When your time is over, you'll be given a verbal warning and then muted when 2 minutes and 15 seconds have passed to allow for as much participation as possible. You'll also see there's a timer as one of our little boxes that will help count you down. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others will not be allowed. And so if there are any disruptions, a warning will be given, and then any further disruption will result in the person being muted or then ejected for the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all of the council meetings are recorded. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. So again, tonight we're going to hear some opening remarks from City Council members. This is so that you can get grounded in our discussion and so that this evening we can hear your testimony for these decision makers to be able to inform this budget as well as future budget cycles. So to provide some opening testimony, we would love to hear first from City Council member Ryan.
Thank you, Jen, and good evening, everyone. First, I want to say I hope that you are enjoying the Passover and Easter season, and we're also in the middle of Ramadan. And I think this convergence happens once every 30 years. I said on Saturday, it's a fitting time for us to be in a listening and reflective mode. I'm so grateful to be here with all of you, especially those of you who are with us this evening that will take time out of your evening to share what's on your mind about the city's budget. And so I'm just really grateful to all of you who are here this evening. This budget cycle, I will remain committed to supporting our city's top 3 priorities: furthering strategic investments in homelessness, community safety, economic recovery, with a very active lens on both racial equity and climate justice. With limited resources, we're allocating this year's focus on filling gaps in the housing continuum, helping our homeless neighbors get services that they need to successful housing, and creating more affordable homeownership opportunities. Also, to invest in the city's public safety transformation efforts with a sharp eye on the integration of our first responder system and improved handoffs for services, and advancing opportunities that promote our city's economy, which includes a resource permit improvement transition team to ensure a successful transformation of our permitting system and building on these much needed decades delayed reforms where top-down solutions have failed in the past. This is an all-in effort that we must see through. So thank you for coming this evening, and I really value your input as we create a budget, a map, if you will, that moves Portland forward. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Commissioner Hardesty.
Good, thank you, Jen, and thank you, Director Kennard, and your fabulous team for always preparing so well for these opportunities. I want to say that I know Portlanders have been through a lot in the last 2 years, and we are on the cusp of attempting to come back. And I just want Portlanders to know that I'm committed to all of us coming back, because what we learned over the last couple of years is that all of us have experienced crises after crises after crises, but it hit some communities hardest first, and it continues to exacerbate those communities. So I'm really appreciative that you would take time to be here this evening, and I want to hear what's on your mind, and I want to hear how you can help us frame a budget that actually reflects the values of the city of Portland. I say this budget is it's a value statement about who we are and what we're building towards coming out of all the crises that we've experienced. I will end this by saying, I hope that we as a community will start talking about how do we start healing. You can't go from trauma to trauma to trauma without taking time to heal. And I hope, and I know our community has great ideas about what that looks like. And I'm very interested in that. We cannot continue to be at the edges. We have to be in the middle, working together. So look forward to hearing what you have to say this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Mapps.
Good evening. I want to thank everyone who tuned in today to participate in today's budget listening session. I'm eager to learn about community concerns. And for those of you who are participating in the city's budget process for the first time, here are 2 things you should know. First, you should know where we are in the budget process. And second, you should know how much money we have to spend. Let's take that first item first. Here's where we are in the budget process. As you heard, on May 5th, the mayor will release his proposed budget. Then members of this council will have the opportunity to offer amendments to that budget. Should those amendments be supported by 3 people on council, they will be approved, and the mayor's budget, which is amended, will go on to be the final budget adopted by this city. So the testimony you provide today will educate the mayor about what you'd like to see in that budget. And your testimony tonight will also educate members of this council about amendments we might suggest for the mayor's proposed budget. Now, here's the second thing you should know about this budget process, and that is how much money the city has to spend in the next budget cycle. The funds we have basically fall into 2 buckets. We have one bucket for ongoing projects. That's things like hiring staff who we expect to stick around for more than 5 years. And second, we have another bucket for one-time expenses. These are projects that we expect to be completed in a year or two. Now, for this next fiscal year, we have almost no money for ongoing projects. We expect to have about $200,000 for new ongoing projects. That's enough to hire maybe 1 or 2 new permanent employees. On the other hand, we have much more money for short-term projects. I think we have about $128 million that can be spent on one-time efforts. So tonight, as you advocate for your ideas, I hope that you keep these 2 constraints in mind. And with that, I will turn the floor back to my colleagues.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight for our second budget forum this year. And for the past several weeks, we've been diving into the city budget to ensure that we're in clear alignment with our stated priorities and what's important to Portlanders and also our values as a city. And now it's that critical time where we need to hear directly from you. Your voices are critical to our budget discussions and to help to further shape and prioritize this next year. We know we are up against many challenges and crises in our city, and especially as we emerge on the other side of the pandemic. And that's why we're still focused on our priorities for housing and houselessness, community safety, economic stability and recovery, and also for me, climate action and our green infrastructure and arts. So as we dive in further today, I want to thank you for caring about our community, for being here, and for speaking to your experiences and your priorities. We'll need them for this next set of deliberations. We're here to listen and learn so that we can take action to move our city forward. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Mayor Wheeler.
Well, thanks again, everybody, for being here tonight. Jen, thank you for facilitating today. I always appreciate it when people come out in fairly large numbers to testify on a busy weeknight. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to do this. We're very interested in hearing what you have to say today. Last Saturday was our first listening session. We heard from a number of Portlanders regarding a variety of issues. We heard about climate. We heard about different perspectives on community safety. We heard a considerable amount about outdoor recreation investments, considerable amount of information on how best to achieve the city's climate action goals, investments in parks, and many, many other areas that were important to people who testified. I am definitely looking forward to hearing more from our community tonight on how we can best address these and other issues that are impacting the city. And as my colleagues have noted, it's no secret that Portland, like many other cities across the United States, have been working to recover from the social and the economic impacts of the pandemic, which are still very much with us, to learn from the transformative social justice movement we've witnessed over the last few years, and of course, to address both the mental health and the substance abuse and other issues that are fueling the rates of chronic homelessness that we continue to see in our community. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say we have all collectively gone through a very challenging 2 years. But I also want to say this: in the face of these challenges, Portlanders continue to be compassionate, resilient, resourceful, and forward-thinking. Portland, of course, is in the midst of an incredible transition, but I want to be clear, I'm not looking for ways to return this city to the way it was in 2019. I think we can do even better than that. In our fall and our spring budget adjustments, we made significant investments to address not only the community's most pressing concerns today, but also think about how we want to change as a city and as a community as we become more inclusive and more equitable in the way that we deliver services around homelessness, around community safety, economic recovery, and prosperity in other areas. We have been, and we should continue to invest in ways that not only support our basic services, but really lay the foundation for the Portland we want to see in 2025 and beyond. And as I develop the proposed budget, which I'll release in the coming weeks, I'm going to continue with an eye to that vision, with an eye to the future. So I'm energized to hear what you all have to say today. I appreciate your being here. Thank you very much. And I'll turn this over to our budget director, Jessica Kennard, who's going to walk us through some of the basics of the budget. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, and greetings to listeners at home and everybody on the line. My name is Jessica Kennard. I'm the city's budget director. I'm going to provide you with a very brief high-level overview of the city's budget to help inform and empower your engagement tonight and in the future. Next slide, please. So the city is not the only entity providing important public services to Portlanders, and we partner with other local and regional governments to provide comprehensive services to our communities. The county, which for Portland includes Multnomah, Clark, and Washington counties, provides human services, public health services, libraries, the district attorney, management of the jail and parole and probation systems, among other services. We also have TriMet, who provides bus, light rail, and commuter rail service in the greater Portland region. And of course, Metro is our unique regional government that plans for the future of the Portland region and provides parks, venues, and services that cross city and county lines. And of course, our public school districts are important jurisdictional partners. Next slide, please. At the city, we organize our bureaus and services into 7 major service areas, all pictured on this slide, with the exception of our elected offices. The city's Bureau of Transportation manages traffic infrastructure, parking, the streetcar, and locally owned roads. The public utilities include the Bureau of Environmental Services and the Water Bureau. Public safety includes police, fire, 911 call taking, and emergency management services. Parks and Rec is a single bureau, but also has several functions and services, as you can see on this slide. Community development includes the Bureau of Development Services, which is our permitting and review function, our Planning and Sustainability Bureau, the Office of Community and Civic Life, the Housing Bureau, and the Office for Community and Technology. And we also send resources to the county for the Joint Office of Homeless Services through the Housing Bureau in that service area as well. And then finally, city support services includes all those back office functions that support the frontline service provision. Next slide, please. So this chart shows how the city's total $5.9 billion budget is divided amongst those 7 service areas. These are total budget figures that include both operating dollars for day-to-day functions, as well as dollars for multi-year needs. So you'll see in this slide that the largest service areas are public utilities, followed by administration and support. This is because these functions hold large multi-year capital and debt financing plans. So their total budget figures incorporate much more than their annual operating budgets. Next slide, please. Budget conversations and decisions often focus on general fund discretionary resources, as these resources can be allocated with few restrictions. However, of the total city budget, only about 10% is comprised of discretionary resource. It's important to remember that as we talk about general fund discretionary allocations, that we're only talking about a relatively small piece of the city's budget pie. Next slide. So when we look at the general fund discretionary, this is how it breaks down by those same service areas. The current year's revised budget as of March includes about $604 million in general fund discretionary resource. And you can see that the largest piece of that pie is in the public safety service area. The majority of general fund discretionary dollars are used to support the police, fire and rescue, and the 911 call taking system, with the Police Bureau as the largest allocation, followed by fire and rescue. Additionally, the city spends a notable portion of discretionary resources on parks and recreation and on community development services, such as homeless services and planning services. Next slide, please. So you heard a little bit about our forecasted available resource from Commissioner Maps. And just to clarify what we're looking at here in terms of our available discretionary, we forecast resources over a 5-year horizon, and we look for resources to be available each of those 5 years. And if they are, we consider those resources ongoing, and we encourage council to support ongoing program and needs with those ongoing resources. However, if we look over 5 years and resources are available in 1 year or in the current year, but not projected to be available due to other expenses or changes in the forecast in the out years, we don't want to necessarily have those resources be spent on ongoing programs and people, because that would require cutting those programs and people in subsequent years. And so we refer to those resources available as one time, and we have about $28 million of one-time available resource forecasted in this budget process. By city policy, half of that $28 million goes towards major maintenance needs in our parks and transportation emergency response. It's called our capital set aside account, and that leaves about $14 million of truly discretionary funds that council can allocate how they choose. Next slide, please. In addition, this year, we have an opportunity with the allocation of American Rescue Plan Act funds. We have received at the City of Portland a total of $204 million in the local relief fund allocation, and half of that amount, about $104 million, was allocated last year. And you can find out more about how those resources were allocated by going to the link on this slide in blue. The second tranche allocation of $104 million is expected to be distributed to the city this spring and is available to be allocated by the council as part of the budget process that they're considering right now. Next slide, please. So finally, if you're interested in finding more information about the city's budget, we encourage you to go to our website, portland.gov/CBO, or email our office at citybudgetoffice, portlandoregon.gov. Next slide, please. And then finally, we very much encourage you to continue sharing your budget perspectives and your comments with the city. You can sign up to testify. One of those bullet points, of course, is today, but the next opportunity, as you heard Jen say, is next Thursday, May 5th. So hope to hear from you then if you haven't been able to have your voice heard at one of these events that we've had over this weekend. And then, of course, you are always available to submit your online testimony either via MAP app at the link that's shown on the screen or by emailing budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. And we will share all of your budget comments with the commissioners and with the mayor. And with that, I will conclude my presentation and turn it back over to Jen.
Great. Thank you so much, Director Kennard. For this next part of the agenda, we're going to hear from our invited community testimony. Council office is connected with community members to ensure that tonight we're hearing from diversity of voices during these listening sessions. So our first testimony of the evening is dedicated to this invited testimony, which will be followed by open testimony from the public. There'll be 2 minutes for testimony, and a timekeeper, my colleague Jeremiah, will be timing the testimony. When a timekeeper says time at 2 minutes and you hear the alarm from our blue sky timer, you'll know that your time is up. So please conclude your comments. If you continue to speak beyond 2 minutes and 30 seconds, then you'll have to be muted so that we can hear from everybody. If you're joining us by phone, you can use *6 to mute or unmute yourself. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeremiah to call our next panel of invited speakers.
Thank you, Jen. So for today, our first 3 invited speakers will be Preston Korst, Keith Jones, and Tim Miller. We'll start with Preston Korst.
Hello, am I seen and heard? Excellent, great. Well, hello everyone, commissioners and mayor, thank you so much for having me. My name is Preston Korst. I'm the Director of Government Relations at Habitat for Humanity here in the Portland region. First of all, I just want to start off by saying a big thank you to each of you and your staff, as well as Director Callahan and folks over at PHB, as we've met with you many times over the past few months to discuss our budget priorities and some of the resources that we've been requesting, mainly related to the American Rescue Plan Act, which I'm sure you are all aware of. Particularly thankful to Commissioner Ryan for his support and proposition of the one specific budget item that I'm here to talk about today, and that is the land acquisition fund that we, Habitat, but also a group of 6 or so affordable homeownership developers are very supportive of. And before I do, I want to, before I dive into the specifics, want to touch quickly on why we're advocating for land acquisition, and that is really to help our organizations as well as the city help close the racial homeownership gap here in Portland. As it currently stands between, there's pretty much most data sets suggest that there's about a 30% gap between white households and households of color when it comes to homeownership rates. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on and really are particularly investing in going forward. And we think that these one-time capital costs, capital expenditures that are outlined in the American Rescue Plan Act really are perfect for helping our organizations, Habitat included, get land under our feet to begin to build a homeownership development pipeline that serves folks earning between 30 and 80% of area median income. Particularly now is a great time for these funds because, oh, is that me? Great. All right, thank you so much for your time. Take care.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Keith Jones.
Hello, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. My name is Keith Jones, and I'm the Executive Director of Friends of Green Loop. I'm here today in support of PBOT's budget ask to support the Healthy Business Program and to help make it permanent. I've been involved with this program since its inception and cannot emphasize enough how important it has been to the city of Portland during the pandemic and how it will play a crucial role in revitalization and resilience going forward. During the pandemic, this program created spaces outdoors where businesses could serve their customers safely, and make no mistake, it saved several of them from folding. It also allowed organizations to create spaces where the community could gather safely, allowing us to interact and maintain social connections. I worked on several of these healthy business installations all over the city. Although they were all different, a common theme that emerged was that these spaces never fully realized their potential as designed. The barriers they shared were costs involved around traffic control rental, outdoor furniture, and site management. For Northwest 13th, we originally planned on 8 blocks of street activations that included outdoor dining, retail, a beer garden, and community space. If we did it all, it would have cost approximately $20,000 a month to operate. That included $9,500 a month just to rent the traffic control devices necessary. This budget ask would simplify the process, offer centralized operations support, and reduce some of the burden on the public to create these spaces, allowing them to be more creative and focus on making Portland a healthy and vibrant community. You will be making an investment in our future that will have a lasting return. I'd like to thank Commissioner Hardesty for expanding this program, working to make it permanent, and with this budget ask, making it more accessible to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, we'll hear from Tim Miller.
All right, thank you very much, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. I'm sorry, I planned for 8 to 10 minutes and since it was invited testimony, but I'm going to be really quick. So I'm the director of Oregon Business for Climate. We have about 100 members employing nearly 30,000 Oregonians, many of them here in Portland, and we share the basic principle that addressing climate change is both an imperative and an opportunity for our economy. We're also one of 6 organizations that recently wrote to you all in support of PSEF and challenging the thinking of other business groups who wanted to stall action. So I'm just going to hit some high-level business perspectives in support of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability Climate Emergency Request. At a high level, these positions, from a business perspective, business leaders I've talked to said they're happy to hear that these positions are part of a plan. It's not just throwing money at a problem, they're part of a plan. Second, they fit with climate experts' priorities that we need to address buildings, transportation, and the grid. You've already done work on buildings. Now we're talking about transportation and the grid. Third, this is all about engagement. It's critical to have that laying the foundation for policies and programs. So we make sure that these programs drive benefits to our most impacted community members in Portland. So on to the particular roles, the clean grid role. This will create lots of engagement with community members, including businesses like my group, and working with the utilities and the Public Utility Commission, find new projects, find community resilience centers, prioritize some of that work, starting with East Portland and some of those resilience needs, and really create some interesting energy projects here that create jobs and create opportunities and resilience. On the transportation side, we're talking about creating improved electric vehicle infrastructure. We're talking about EV-ready codes here so that we see more of that infrastructure going in. And this also creates jobs for our electricians and creates opportunities for community-based organizations. So thanks for the opportunity to talk tonight and bring a business perspective to support these 2 critical positions and the city's strategic progress on addressing climate change and bringing benefits to the whole community. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Our next 3 invited testimonies for tonight would be Casey Mills, John Bryson, and Ryan Ernst. We'll hear from Casey Mills first.
Thank you and good evening. I'm Casey Mills. Although I'm a member of the Parks Board and the Parks Budget Advisory Committee, I'm speaking today on behalf of myself only as a Portland resident and a parks user. Portland Parks and all the things that parks and parks programs provide are one of the greatest assets of the city. A healthy and vibrant parks and recreation system is a key to a healthy and vibrant Portland. The 2020 Parks Levy was approved by the citizens of Portland to preserve and enhance parks and recreation services. The levy was intended to be an incremental increase in resources for parks to provide an incremental increase in park services over its 5-year life. In particular, an increase in the equitable distribution of park services. During the levy's referral process, some stakeholders voiced concerns about the risk of levy funds being used to fund other city programs or close general fund gaps. In response to those concerns, we understood that it was council's intention to continue to treat the general fund component for parks on a par with other general fund bureaus. That levy funds would not be used to free up general fund resources or for other uses, even where city bureaus, including parks, were taking that general fund reduction to balance the city's budget. In this manner, the full benefit of funding provided by the levy, which was resoundingly approved by the citizens of Portland, would not be diluted. I want to thank the council for keeping this commitment. The allocation of park share of the compensation set aside reflected in this year's budget and in the spring bump shows council's commitment to the effective use of levy funds for parks and parks programs. Parks programs continue to be one of the greatest assets of the city and one of the greatest benefits to its citizens. I want to again thank the council for its efforts to maximize levy resources to deliver improved and more equitable parks and park services to Portlanders, and I look forward to the council's continued support in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from John Bryson.
Good evening. My name is John Bryson. I'm a member of the user board for the Bureau of Emergency Communications, also known as the BOEC or BOEC. I'm asking you tonight to approve the budget request for the BOEC. The members of the BOEC user board and the BOEC finance committee all agreed that the budget request is crucial to the sustained operation of BOEC for today and building a better BOEC for the future. It's important to remember that this budget request impacts not just the citizens of Portland, but all citizens of Multnomah County. Unlike many bureaus or departments in the city of Portland, the BOEC reaches outside the Portland city limits as well. The BOEC is the first responder for emergency services, covering an area from the Northwest Hills and Savies Island in the west, all the way east to Bonneville Dam, and from the Columbia River south to Clackamas County line. Along with the cities of Gresham, Troutdale, Wood Village, Fairview, and Maywood Park, this area also encompasses rural areas such as the scenic Columbia River Gorge. While each city user agency pay their fair share to the BOEC, Portland, as the biggest contributor or user, sets the standard and defines the budget. As the first responder, the team at the BOEC has to be well-staffed and trained to handle anything from a minor traffic incident on a Portland area roadway to a major rope rescue in the gorge. As consumers in our daily life, we make choices all the time as to what stores we'll shop at, what brands we'll buy, what cars we'll purchase. We look for service, quality, and value. But when a person calls 911 for assistance, they don't make a brand choice. They call the number that's been taught to them at an early age, yet they have the same expectations of quality and service. It's important to approve this budget request, not just to maintain the level of services that the BOEC provides to all the first responder user agencies in Portland and Multnomah County, but to continue to improve the level of service and prepare for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Ryan Ernst.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Ernst. I live in Southeast Portland. I want to thank Commissioner Mapps for the opportunity for this opportunity and for quickly responding to my concerns. It was 2 years ago. I was riding my bike along the Selwood waterfront when I saw a man and his daughter riding bikes. He fell off of his bike and began having a heart attack. We didn't know that at the time. I called 911 and it took about 10 minutes to get an operator on the phone and then another 10 minutes for AMR to show up. The operator asked if I could go to a local business and find a defibrillator to start treating the man. And so I did. And I felt like I did my best to serve my neighbor at that point in time. But I didn't feel like the city held up its end of the deal. The man passed away, and I felt that trauma for weeks later. 2 months ago, I called non-emergency when I saw a bunch of needles on Southeast 72nd, and there were more than I could count, and they were outside of an apartment complex. And so I called non-emergency because that's what we're supposed to do. 45 minutes later, I got somebody on the phone. 3 weeks ago, I called non-emergency and I waited 50 minutes. We have 8 children on my small street, and we saw a person like racing up and down our street a few times, which just made us feel like we can't even go outside because we have no sidewalks. We don't have any kind of infrastructure to feel like we can be outside safely. And that's just not good enough. When you call, you expect someone to answer. You don't expect someone to die while waiting on the phone. You don't expect a person to be able to drive away without any tickets or issues. So we need a better system, better emergency system. And I hope you'll find a new system that'll push us forward so we can have a safe, secure, and the confidence that we need for the city to deliver top line services.
Thank you. And our final invited testimony for this evening would be Kimberly Dixon.
Well, greetings, Mayor Wheeler and commissioners. I'm Kimberly Dixon. While I am the vice chair for the FitCog, I come to you simply as a citizen and a mother in our city. My condolences first to families who have lost, and most recently, families last night. I'd like to believe that it is not lost upon any of you the connected crisis we are in. The rampant violence in our city impacts first responders from our police, doctors, ambulance personnel, fire, 911, as well as teachers and administrators, small business, construction workers, service industry, our youth, our seniors, moms and dads, and especially marginalized groups. Are you getting my point? All these folks are part of the makeup of community, and all are feeling the crisis we are in. I'm asking yet again to fund the police. I've stated before that it isn't about more police. Rather, it is the appropriate amount of hands on deck to effectively address, interrupt, investigate, respond to criminal activity. We are below recommended staffing levels. Currently, to address the 400 shootings, over 100 injuries, and roughly 30 murders to date. Summer brings with it the hopes of recreating and enjoyment, but for those of us that are survivors and or work and live in this community, we know the other side of what summer brings in terms of the uptick in violence. We thinned the soup already through defunding, and we have outrageous data points as the result. Increasing staffing is part of the solution model needed. As a city, we are bleeding out, literally. I need you to hear the lives that have been lost to violence and those of us that have been left to grieve. I need you to hear the citizens who want to move about this city safely, to get to school, work, do business, and recreate. Make the investment and demonstrate true care and concern for the immense trauma and injury already suffered. Properly fund the police to advance the safety of our city for our residents, our communities.
Thank you. I'll hand it over back to Jen.
Great, thank you very, very much to our invited testimony. Next, we'll hear open testimony from members of the public who signed up in advance to testify tonight. We have a lot of testimony, and there's a lot of really very important topics that we want to hear from you all to cover. So I want to remind everyone to please stop when you see the timer get to 0 or you hear Jeremiah call time. We want to make sure also tonight that everyone is following our rules of conduct for respectful communication. If you're in violation of the rules, I'll give a reminder, and then if the behavior continues, you'll be muted or removed. A lot of people have signed up, and we want to make sure that everyone who signed up is also heard. So there'll be 2 minutes to testimony. The timer will go at 2 minutes, and Jeremiah will give you a reminder at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, you'll be muted. Just as a reminder, if you're joining us by phone, you can use the *6 to mute or unmute. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Jeremiah, who will call the names, and then you'll be invited to unmute.
Thanks, Jen. So for the next 3, for the first 3 open testimony, we will have Mark D'Arienzo, Amy Wexler, and Beatrix Lee. Mark Lorenzo, you're first. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you very much. My name is Mark DiOrienzo, and I'm a member of Extinction Rebellion. And as you know, the Climate Emergency Declaration says the city will amend the city's emission reduction targets to at least a 50% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030 and net zero carbon emissions by 2050, and also commits the city to adopt new policies that prevent further expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure in the city and quicken the transition to clean renewable fuels. I believe the city needs to move faster toward a clean energy future in many ways, including developing emission reduction standards, both their own operation and materials acquisition, but also in contracts with all those the city does business with. And as one of the largest cities, we should move toward our own clean energy districts like in California, and then utilize those profits for furthering transitions to electrification and other climate goals. And the city needs to continue to push for the end to storage and export of fossil fuels, not necessary for regional use, and to design a managed decline for fossil fuels overall, recognizing the need for transitioning the critical energy infrastructure hub. And finally, the city's new economic opportunity analysis needs to state the economic danger of business as usual and require that the seriousness of climate change and its impact be a central theme of the planning document. It must clearly state that emission reductions and climate resiliency are critical to a healthy economy for all the Portlanders, and you need to include concrete steps for reducing greenhouse gas emissions as part of this plan. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Amy Wexler.
Thank you so much. My name is Amy Wexler, and I'm a Portland resident, and I am the state legislative lead with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. For over a year, our local officials have been on the front lines responding to the dual public health crises of COVID-19 and gun violence. The pandemic exacerbated the structural circumstances in which both a virus and city gun violence thrive. Racially disparate access to resources, chronic disinvestment, and entrenched poverty. As a result, not only did COVID-19 disproportionately impact Black and Brown communities in our cities, 2020 and 2021 experienced rates of gun homicide in Portland not seen in decades. Thankfully, the federal government under President Biden's leadership has taken steps to assist cities like Portland respond to the impact of COVID by passing the American Rescue Plan. Local governments can and have been utilizing ARP funds to prevent and address gun violence in cities. The Department of Treasury's final rule states that evidence-based practices like focused deterrence, street outreach, violence interrupters, and hospital-based violence intervention models are eligible uses under the law. We now need our city leaders to use those ARP funds to invest in our city's gun violence prevention infrastructure by fully funding the Office of Violence Prevention's $5.4 million budget request. The funding at this level would include the following critical investments: intensive case management. This includes 18 life coaches serving 150 to 180 individuals who would focus on the highest risk individuals aged 18 to 35. Prevention specialists, which would use Cure Violence street outreach model, which includes 20 violence interrupters and up to 8 outreach workers. This is a place-based violence prevention strategy that will serve 4 areas in the city of Portland that have had a significant increase in gun-related violence. And the request includes additional direct support and resources for families and individuals impacted by gun violence. The ARP was passed by Congress and signed by the president specifically to address the impacts of the pandemic, which we have seen has included record increases of gun violence in our city. Thank you so much for taking my testimony.
Thank you. Next, we have Beatrix Lee.
Yeah, so I am here representing Oregon Justice Resource Center. We're a civil rights legal organization, and we work to hold police and prisons accountable. We're in ongoing lawsuits representing protesters as well as Portlanders who have been brutalized by the police. Here to testify to divest in Portland police and invest in Portland street response and invest in community resources. I want to highlight a stat where we're talking about budgets here, where, you know, U.S. military is the highest spender of all the militaries in the world. Second is China, and third out of all militaries and police is the U.S. police. with just over $100 billion. And so we already have a highly bloated budget. And I'm sure if we put Portland's budget next to other countries' militaries and police, we would see that we also have a very bloated budget. So when we hear rhetoric around the fact that crime is up because we defunded the police, we really have to look at data. And so I would point to Kat McKelvey's research in which found that crime rates are not correlated with the number of police officers that we have in the US. And in thinking about the OIR report as well, in that report that was created by a group in Southern California that was not research based, but rather had suggestions that don't have any correlation with reducing police violence. And so thank you.
Thank you. Our next three open testimonies would be from Harriet Cook, Dr. Jim Gaudino, and Andre Lightsey Walker. We'll start off with Harriet Cook.
Hi, my video. My name is Harriet Cook, and I'm not a lobbyist. I'm associated with 350 PDX Forest Defense Team. I want to begin by thanking you all. I appreciate your work in addressing so many complex problems and the evolving understanding of solutions and the courage to change your positions when old ideas aren't working. I'm speaking today on shade equity, particularly in East Portland, one of the most impacted areas of the shade equity issue. In general, there's a 13-degree difference between wealthy shaded neighborhoods and low to middle income neighborhoods without trees. In last year's heat dome, there was a 25-degree difference. Last year, more than 60 Portland residents died from extreme heat. Within public health, we know that as temperatures go up, violence rates go up. The climate crisis is just going to get worse, making it harder for new trees to establish and existing trees to thrive. We need skilled tree maintenance that will continue this will be of continued importance. The policy of holding adjacent property owners responsible for street tree maintenance creates a disincentive for planting the large form trees that we need to grow the urban tree canopy and shade our transportation corridors. For the fiscal year 22-23, Portland Parks and Rec is requesting $3 million to plant trees in the East Portland and other high priority areas. And I want to support the request for earmarking 50,000 of that for a study to evaluate funding mechanisms for the assume maintenance costs for street trees. That's the basis. I know I have a couple more seconds. As I was sitting here, the idea came to me, would it be kosher for some of the excess PSEF funds to be earmarked for maintenance and for training of community members and maintenance of these street trees in their communities, building community resilience through nature? So I'm just throwing that idea out there that
Thank you. All right, so a bit of a change in the next three people. We will have Deborah Katz, Beth Nelson, and Wandi Magand Ali to go next. So for the first person, it would be Deborah Katz. Deborah Katz, are you able to unmute yourself? Please press
There we
star
go.
6. Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Deborah Katz. I am a longtime member of North Star Clubhouse. This is about Southeast Uplift Small Grants Program. North Star is an accredited evidence-based program that helps adults with mental health challenges in the Portland metro area obtain and maintain employment, learn new skills and gain confidence, and build a supportive wellness community. We currently have over 100 active members. Instead of therapy, members get well by contributing to all aspects of running our nonprofit agency. Clubhouses are all over the world. They are not treatment, therapy, or drop-in centers. They help bring people from darkness and isolation into the light by living fulfilling lives. There is no other agency in the Portland metro area that provides the crucial services that North Star does. Every year, North Star struggles to make our budget. Last year, we decided to reach out to Portland mentally ill immigrants, refugees, and others with limited English proficiency who are often marginalized, low-income people of color. We need to translate our materials into Spanish, Russian, and Vietnamese, do outreach, and pay for interpreters. Without the 2 grants we received from Southeast Uplift, this project would not exist. No other agency does what Southeast Uplift does. They fund Portland agencies working to support and empower communities and help underserved and diverse populations. I strongly encourage the Portland City Council to continue to fund the small grants program. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, Beth Nelson.
Hello, my name is Beth Nelson. I'm a Portland resident and a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I'm also the parent of public school students who have witnessed gun violence right outside their schools and in our community. I'm testifying in support of the Office of Violence Prevention. Excuse me. While the Portland Police Department may have a role in public safety, we must recognize that we will not address gun violence with law enforcement alone. We need a strategy that intervenes in conflicts before they begin. And that's why it's critically important for the city to use the opportunity provided by federal funding to invest in proven community-driven solutions to gun violence. The Office of Violence Prevention is ideally positioned to coordinate and support the work of frontline community-based organizations with grants funded by the American Rescue Plan. Excuse me, sorry. To prevent gun violence, Portland needs to provide adequate funding for street outreach workers. Credible messengers have been shown to reduce shootings by identifying and mediating in conflicts before they turn deadly. This approach has been shown to work in other cities across the country and should receive the necessary funding here locally. Street outreach programs provide immediate crisis response services for those directly exposed to and/or involved in gun violence, as well as long-term stabilization and support. This public health approach to violence prevention works to prevent shooting and to interrupt the spread of violence. Trained violence interrupters and outreach workers help to prevent shootings by identifying and mediating conflicts immediately in the community. These case managers and teams are able to work with those most at risk, earn their trust, and influence their behavior because of their credibility within the community and often their own history with gun violence. They continue to work with people at high risk of involvement in gun violence by providing ongoing case management and connecting them to social supports. But just as you can't put out a 5-alarm fire with one firefighter, we can't expect the same of the community intervention programs. We can't expect an underfunded and under-resourced. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Wandi Magan Ali.
Hello, and my name is Wanda Maganyali. I'm a founder of Unity Football Training Soccer Program, and I'm here to talk about small grant programs like Southeast Uplift Coalition can help, a small emerging nonprofit organization like Unity Football Training, and to make a difference. Unity, first and foremost, Unity Football Training is an emerging nonprofit organization established in 2019 that provides youth of African descendants a place to cultivate and develop positive social skills through sports. Unity Football Training's mission is to improve the quality of life and social perception of youth and families of African descendants by providing physical education and creative physical education interventions that cultivate our community's personal and social responsibilities, independence, and creative potential. Through soccer, youth have developed, cognitive and gross motor skills with their peers and continue to showcase their talent through community games and tournaments. We hope that, at Unity Football Training, we hope that by helping youth increase their creative and cognitive skills, we encourage them to develop self-initiative and a positive image. And me personally, growing up, I didn't know places like Southeast Uplift Coalition existed. And we didn't have, community help except open gyms at Peninsula Park. I was just, as emerging nonprofit small grants, we are a way, small grants are a way for us to build foundations to make a difference in our communities. I just, I just hope, they stick around. Thank you.
Thank you. Next three testimonies for this evening would be from Alan Lueke, Alex Chern, and Sean Christian. Alan Lueke, over to you.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Luebke, and I am here as a citizen. This is actually my first meeting I've ever attended, and certainly the first one I've ever spoken at. Thanks for having me here. I've just been so impressed with how organized and prepared everyone is. So I want to take a moment to tell you a story about the neighborhood I live in, which is this wonderful neighborhood in Madison South. It's a street between 82nd and Milton and 85th and Milton. It's a 1-block strip. There's no 83rd or 84th. And in the last 6 months, this 1-block strip has been the victim of 5 different reported shootings and 4 shooting deaths. And on a daily basis, we see violence, including neighbor intimidation. All of this is going on at a single property called Madison Suites, a short-term motel. About 3 or 4 months ago, some neighbors and I got together. We started a little group. We meet once a month. And we've started to work with the Central Northeast Neighborhood Coalition, the Neighborhood Response Team, currently working with a reporter at the Oregonian to try to confront the violent crime in our neighborhood. It probably goes without saying that people don't really feel safe to even leave their home. On a regular basis, there's a serious police presence in the neighborhood. There was a canine unit on the street today. There were 2 vehicles from the police parked outside the last couple of days. So I'm here just to tell my story and to start getting involved in the process of working with the city and to learn what I can do to help the city support us and to help us support the city. So thanks for having me. Thanks for hearing me, and look forward to being here for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Alex Chern.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. My name is Alex Sharon, and I manage the partnerships and grant making programs at Southeast Uplift Neighborhood Coalition. We're proud to be one of the 7 district coalition offices that received small grants program funding last year from the Office of Community and Civic Life. I'm here tonight to urge you to restore funding to this program in next year's budget. The small grants program is worth preserving because it provides a low barrier opportunity to uplift historically marginalized communities at the grassroots level. It fulfills an important need in helping us engage members of our community who might never participate in a neighborhood association. For Southeast Uplift, the Small Grants Program serves as a vital tool for helping us advance the equity goals that we share in common with the city of Portland. As you heard on Saturday, Southeast Uplift recently awarded just over $60,000 in small grants, thanks to the Small Grants Program funding that we received this current fiscal year. Yet we still have far more applications than we could possibly fund. In these times when need is so great, we hope you'll restore some level of funding to this program. With your continued support of the Small Grants Program in the upcoming fiscal year, Southeast Uplift and all the other coalition districts offices in the city can serve as a partner with the city in helping our communities recover from the pandemic, supporting climate change resilience, and addressing the needs of our most vulnerable neighbors. Please reconsider any cuts to the Small Grants Program so we can continue to fund the inspiring ideas that make Portland great. It's what I believe our communities truly need. And lastly, please watch for an invitation to attend Southeast Uplift's Grantee Mixer in early June, where you can meet our amazing grant recipients and the incredible projects that they are all doing with your support. Thank you for listening. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. And next we'll have Sean Christian.
Hi, my name is Sean Christian, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my testimony tonight. The latest IPCC report states that greenhouse gas emissions must begin a downward trajectory no later than 2025 in order to avoid unthinkable consequences. It also provides a roadmap for policymakers on what needs to be done to get there. The city needs sufficient funding for both emissions reduction strategies as well as climate resiliency, and the current budget proposals favor the latter as opposed to the hard work of taking responsibility for stopping the root sources of the problem. We cannot just focus on a build your own lifeboat approach, which is morally reprehensible given the equity issues posed for Oregon tribes and others facing drought and wildfires, not to mention the global South. The city needs a comprehensive action strategy with annual target commitments of a 5 to 10% yearly reduction in emissions paired with substantive concrete action steps to reach those goals. A 10% annual reduction addresses the necessity to rapidly start a substantial decline, takes into account the unknown factors related to feedback loops and tipping points, which could lead to unanticipated exponential increases in greenhouse gas releases, and concedes that once low-hanging fruits in terms of reduction policies are accomplished, it will become increasingly difficult to maintain that rate over time. But if we are successful, it could buy us the time needed to figure out the more difficult technologies and structural changes this challenge demands. There's a paltry $720,000 slated for addressing the underlying causes of the climate emergency. Instead, the city needs to identify specific decarbonization steps for the next 2 years and ensure that they are funded in this budget. The city must hire a new Bureau of Planning and Sustainability Director with experience in designing and implementing successful emissions reductions policies, or better yet, create a specific position with emergency powers charged with getting the city on the right path, given the critical nature of the climate emergency and short timeline for necessary sufficient actions to be put in place. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good night.
Thank you. Our next 3 testimonies tonight will be from Tyrone Danashinia, Walter Whaler, and Thomas Karwaki. First, we'll hear from Tyrone Danashinia.
You're muted, Tyrone.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Good evening, Commissioner and mayors. My name is Tyrone Danashinia. I am representing from Operation cansofhope.com. Today, our society faces a real uphill battle, which is homelessness. The effects of COVID-19 pandemic has left hundreds of thousands of families without proper resources such as food and water. These resources have become very, very slim, and also too, our budgeting has become very slim. What Operation Cans of Hope seeks to go ahead and do is to use reusable resources such as recyclables, cans and bottles to assist our homeless population. With that said, there is going to be a need for a budgeting system, which will come 0% out of taxpayer pockets. If we're using things such as cans and bottles, which we do have city recycling programs now, we can easily turn those funds that are used, I don't know how they're being used now, but we can go ahead and to reroute those funds to do things such as purchase property, build homes, and also to continue with an ongoing homeless program. OperationCansOfHope.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Walter Whaler.
Ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, I am Walter Weiler, a resident of downtown Portland. I urge you to continue the positive progress you've made on budget items that directly relate to the sense of personal safety that Portland's citizens feel about living in our city. And that sense of safety is essential to the recovery, the healthy business and social life of our city. 3 items. Number 1, increase funding for our police department so they can expand their role in preventing and responding to crime. Number 2, improve the effectiveness and efficiency of our police force by expanding the Public Safety Support Specialist Program. This program allows sworn officers to concentrate on preventing and responding to serious crime that is plaguing our city. Number 3, improve unreasonably long 9/11 wait times by adding 5 additional dispatchers and 2 quality assurance specialists. Unloading 9/11 call volume by expanding non-emergency 311 call funding and capacity. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you. And next, we'll hear from Thomas Karwacki.
Good evening. This is Tom Karwacki from the University Park Neighborhood Association, speaking on behalf of the board. Equity is a major goal and an embedded value of the city's budget process, and the UPNA board feels this is commendable, and we really think that's important. However, North Portland Neighborhood Services in North Portland gets a short straw in this year's budget for Civic Life, Office of Civic Life. Each of the other district coalitions and city-run coalition offices has 2 FTE, while North Portland gets only 1.6 FTE. And yet North Portland Neighborhood Services has been very innovative in working with the homeless shelters and safe rest villages, and we have more houseless villages and safe rest villages in most districts. And we have Greeley, Marine Drive, I-5 bridge, all kinds of high crash corridors. And I just had the cops come by right here because we have some traffic right here, and they're doing something with loud traffic. So the UPNA board urges the city council to add 0.4 FTE to North Portland Neighborhood Services to bring it up to the level of other districts, both independent and city run. And we'd like to particularly suggest and also support what Southeast Uplift has been talking about with small grant programs. We've done a lot. Part of the issues that we find is that the money goes right back into the local economy, and usually using small businesses and BIPOC women-owned businesses. One of the other issues that we have is that generally the director of Civic Life may have been misleading to you when he said that the neighborhood associations were overrepresented in the small grants. And that's largely because they are actually the fiscal sponsor or the vehicle by which these groups can get city required general liability insurance. So we urge you to restore the funding for these 2 programs, and we suggest that you take it out of the $600,000 strategic plan, which is greater than the amount spent on the City Charter Review Commission for such a small office. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next 3 testimonies today would be Stephen Pearls, Lucas Mayer, and Jesse Marin. First, we'll have Stephen Pearls.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for listening this evening to everyone here. And I'm here tonight to help keep the small grants program. Shout out to Alex Sharon. Thank you for your work. My name's Stefan Pearls, and I'm the Executive Director of Passion Impact. For over 5 years, we've partnered with Southeast Uplift through the Community and Small Grant Partner Program, as well as through Neighborhood Coalition support. Due to the grants we've received, students in our programs have been able to produce multiple volunteer fairs and volunteer events at Franklin High School to engage their peers in accessible civic engagement opportunities. Last year, Southeast Uplift provided base funding for our student-demanded pilot program, the Youth Learning Cohort. 7 students from Franklin and McDaniel High Schools engaged in 10 weeks of social justice education. The result of the education took the form of a volunteer event the students built to help their peers learn how to advocate on behalf of and support community members experiencing houselessness. Multiple partners from community orgs provided educational workshops, including another Southeast Uplift grant recipient, master artist Michael Bernard Stevenson Jr. We've received a final community grant from Southeast Uplift this year to confirm the sustainability of the youth learning cohort this fall and are excited to continue that work. I say all this with respect to the funds the city funnels through Southeast Uplift through the Small Grants Program, directly supporting students in becoming the civic leaders we can only hope to be in your seats leading Portland one day. Their interest in understanding the needs of our community mirror the drive that the dozens of other recipients of community grants have to making this city a better place for all, especially those most marginalized. I, along with Passion Impact staff, board, and especially students, stand in complete conviction that the Small Grants Program must remain a part of the Portland budget in order for community members and community organizations to maximize the agency of their civic leadership. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Lucas Mayer.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. I'm here as a citizen and I wanted to talk quickly about climate change and the city's role in decarbonizing. The latest IPCC report that came out last week says that we basically have until 2025, about 3 years, to begin our downward trajectory away from climate catastrophe, and we need to, start decarbonizing, having policies in place by then. There's a lot the city can do in terms of that, and one of the main ones is transportation. The city itself has made a climate emergency declaration, and expanding the freeway is incompatible with the nature of that declaration. The city ought to listen to the families of the Harriet Tubman School who do not wish to be transitioned to new school because of the Rose Quarter expansion. Community members concerned about pollution, noise, increased vehicle must not be ignored. Tangible transportation goals for the city could include electrifying the city's own fleet, electrifying public transit, reducing the use of private vehicle miles traveled, creating infrastructure to support electrified vehicles, lowering public transit costs, especially for low-income people, boosting car sharing, working from home and car-free days, and not letting TriMet purchase additional diesel buses. Furthermore, the city needs to push at all levels of government for aggressively funding bike and pedestrian infrastructure. For example, it could fund and create a policy to retrofit all existing neighborhood greenways to meet the current standards of 1,000 cars or less per day. Just to wrap up here, the city needs a comprehensive action strategy with annual target commitments of 5 to 10% yearly reduction in emissions, paired with substantial concrete action steps to reach those goals. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, we'll hear from Jesse Marin.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Jess Marin, and I'm here on behalf of the Sunnyside Shower Project, a program of the Sunnyside Neighborhood Association. We are requesting that you budget $50,000 to enable this community-built hygiene program to continue to serve our houseless neighbors through 2023. Since January 2021, we have been offering showers, laundry access, clothing, food, vaccine clinics, and connections to services and community. We are open for 4 hours on 3 days a week, offering appointments and drop-in access. Some of our guests have regularly scheduled appointments each week, and some we see only once. We are staffed almost entirely by volunteers from surrounding neighborhoods and from across the city. In our first 6 months of operation, we served over 60 individuals, and we have grown significantly through word of mouth and through referrals from Hygiene for All and other grassroots service providers. I say we are almost entirely run by volunteers because we were one of the fortunate recipients of a small grant from Southeast Uplift. This grant has allowed us to begin paying one of our houseless volunteers to coordinate volunteer shifts and to ensure that the program supplies are stocked and organized. That grant ends this coming December. Our volunteers recently conducted a needs assessment survey with our guests, which revealed that for most of our guests, we are the only hygiene service that they routinely access. We are seeking funding for the Sunnyside Shower Project so that we may continue to fund fund an employed position for all of 2023, and provide increased access to showers, to laundry, toilets, food, clothing, community, and the resources that our guests have requested and require. We hope that you will invest in what has become a crucial community resource for some of our most targeted neighbors. We encourage you to reach out for questions or to sign up for a volunteer shift
Excuse me,
at
Jesse, how much,
Portland.org on the volunteer tab.
excuse me, Jesse, how much did you say you were
50,000.
asking for? 50.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next three testimonies today would be by Annabelle Jucala, Tawasi Tawasi, and Joe Rossi. We'll start off with Annabelle Jucala.
Hello, my name is Annabelle Jucala, and I am a student at Passion Impact. Sorry. All right, dear Portland City Council and fellow Portland residents, my name is Annabelle Jucala, and I'm one of the volunteer event program leaders with Passion Impact. Within my work at Passion Impact, I've been able to make amazing connections with my fellow VEP members, develop my own leadership and civic engagement skills, and create impactful volunteer events for my peers. Without the small grant program, the events my peers and I have planned would not be possible. In the past year, the volunteer event program has hosted a menstrual hygiene drive, which provided free menstrual products for all Franklin students, a campus cleanup in partnership with Earth Club, a jewelry making event which promoted mindfulness and donated all finished jewelry to local women's and houseless shelter Rosehaven, and many others I've yet to mention. Being able to have a feasible budget to host these events when we are unable to get supplies donated gives our students the necessary leeway to plan these events for our community and inspire young leaders to engage in their natural desire to help our community. Many of the students who engage in these desires to help our community with these programs grow up to be the city commissioners and healthcare professionals we all need, vital members of our community. The viability of our programs are very reliant on these grants, and I hope our testimonies will encourage you to think about the young members of the Portland community that depend on these programs. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Tawasi Tawasi.
Hello, Portland City Council and the people of Portland. I just wanted to briefly acknowledge that we are on stolen Chinook lands. The Chinook people are still here. They deserve our recognition. They deserve federal recognition, and they deserve their land back. Last week, a young person died in the city streets of Portland. That person was an Indigenous minor at only 15 years of age. Their camp was swept. One of the few places that they could find security in our city is at a local not-for-profit that helps minors to have access to basic necessities like food, clothing, energy for their phones, community. The city saw fit to sweep the camp where children live, and those children, one of them died. I hold you all personally responsible, and I think that you have blood on your hands. And this goes for each department that contributes to the attacks on unhoused people. The Parks Department sends out dozens of park rangers at midnight to sweep all of the city parks for unhoused people and give them trespass notices. For what? For what? How is that benefiting us? We don't have the money to spend on evicting people who are just trying to sleep so they can die in our streets, especially children. It costs $10,000 to send Rapid Response BioClean to attack an unhoused camp. $10,000. It costs about $12,000 to house a person for a year. The city is willing to spend that money attacking the dignity of the most vulnerable people, including children, and the children who are refugees, Indigenous children who deserve dignity and respect from you colonizers and land back. Sorry to everyone else for going over in the last 30 seconds. It burns me up that the Portland Police Bureau is out there attacking unhoused people. It burns me up that Ted Wheeler tear gas unhoused people. And you should be ashamed, you colonizer timber barons, for what you do with the money your family stole.
Mike, time's up.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Sorry, I missed my train of thought. Next, we hear from Joe Rossi.
Joe, you're up.
Thank you, Portland City Council and Mayor Wheeler. I appreciate, Joe Rossi from Northeast Portland and Park Rose, a lifelong resident in Portland and Northeast. I don't envy your task on prioritizing money, this budget at all. I sympathize with you. I know how hard it must be. John Hardesty said something that was really hit me, was that different communities are impacted harder in this trying time. And I'd like to point out that our community of Park Rose, which is a minority majority school district, has different needs than other parts of the city. And I don't hear people say that. If you pulled Portland, different people in Portland think different things are important, but I'd like to speak to what the issues are here in Park Rose. I'm involved in 2 neighborhood associations. I'm only speaking on behalf of myself, but in our business district and school district, which I'm involved in. What I really hear the most is safety. And I really hear response time to police. People here have kind of given up calling police, and that's kind of sad because there's a lot of unreported crime in our community. I just want to say the disadvantaged community is impacted the most when you underfund police. 911 and 311, which can support 911 and take the burden off, and some programs that help the police better do their job, I think is well placed. I think it counts really high. I think Portlanders should have a reasonable expectation that they're safe. And I want you to think about the guy who gets his window smashed and has to drive to work in the cold and rain in his car multiple times because he can't afford a garage. And that impacts our community the most. So I just want you to consider that in your funding. I'd like to get response times better and better interactions. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final 2 testimonies for this evening will be by Dr. Jim Godino and Nita Guido. Dr. Jim Godino.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We
I'm Dr.
can.
Jim Gaudino. Great. I'm Dr. Jim Gaudino. I'm a prevention specialist, physician, and a longtime public health person. And I really want to congratulate the goals of the budget, and thank you for all your hard work. I have 4 things that I have on my mind today with the lens of public health. One is, don't lose sight of the pandemic. We will see increases in COVID-19, and we need to remember to be able to address those. We're in a different space. But let me get to 3 major priorities. One is addressing climate change. In part, not just focusing, I agree with things that have been said. We need to lower the carbon pollution in this town, but we also need to start addressing community needs related to climate impacts, such as mental health issues and other things that I don't have time to talk about. Another thing is housing and addressing, respectfully addressing the needs of houseless people. And I really encourage you to stay with the balance of short-term and long-term solutions with input from homeless people, houseless people, and using a public health approach. And lastly, violence prevention. We really need to start coordinating efforts in violence prevention, fund the Office of Violence Prevention, increase funding for Portland Street Response, also balance the work of the police. We really can't have duplicative services, and use data in all these things to evaluate how we're doing. I would encourage you to really work more closely with public health and Multnomah County Public Health. Thank you for listening. Have a great night.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Nita Guido.
Hi, Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nita Gadu. I am a resident of Southeast Portland and a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Jim provided a great segue for us here to prevent gun violence and to support survivors of gun violence in our city. Portland needs to adequately resource the Office of Violence Prevention. I know OVP is asking for $5.4 million in the current budget cycle, and I would just like to put our organization's support behind that. The requested money for OVP will pay to expand mentoring programs, street outreach, and community intervention programs, and additional services and supports for survivors of gun violence. Supporting funding for these community-based and locally led intervention programs is a priority for Moms Demand Action. These programs are a critical tool for reducing violence in partnership with local law enforcement and will help to uplift our communities that are most heavily impacted by gun violence. For this reason, I, on behalf of our organization, urge you as commissioners to invest the federal ARPA funds for these life-saving community-based programs coordinated through the Office of Violence Prevention. I really appreciate everyone's time this evening, and I look forward to your final decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so that concludes our open testimony for today. I've been told that there are a few on the call who may have an interest in testifying. Is there anyone who is on the call that would like to quickly provide a testimony? Noelle, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler and City Commissioners. My name is Noelle Studer-Spivak from the Cully neighborhood on Cascade Chinook land. I support the testimony related to our community's needs for housing, preventing gun violence, and strengthening the social infrastructure in Portland. But today I want to provide a global context for the climate-related budget decisions that you're making this session. In 1997, when the Kyoto Protocol was adopted, I was stationed in Senegal, West Africa, helping subsistence farmers teach each other how to grow trees for food and keep the Sahara Desert from expanding. One hot afternoon, I sat with my village chief, Seydou Maudo, talking about how world leaders were discussing what to do about the changing climate. And he said this, Kogonga de jamanoji tobao nowodi ndungunji didi hitande kala. It's the truth. In the past, there were 2 rainy seasons each year. The cows were healthy and food was plentiful. Now there's just 1 rainy season and people don't know whether the rain will come on time for the rice and millet crops. He said, tell the wise leaders in America for me. Be careful with burning petrol. People need clean skies and good rain. Do what you can to put things right. 25 years later, I'm asking you to put things right by considering 3 elements in your climate-related budget decisions. 1, carbon mitigation. Billions of people like those in Seydou Maudo's village count on you to make changes that radically decrease Portland's carbon emissions. 2, adaptation. Investing in equitably distributed nature-based solutions will help all Portlanders adapt to extreme heat, flooding, and air quality events. And 3, justice. It's past time to redress racial disparities. Marginalized communities deserve to thrive on their own terms. All 3 criteria are met by the Shade Equity Coalition's proposal to move the city closer to maintaining its public street trees with a one-time strategic investment of $50,000. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And Cole W., I see your hand.
Hi, I work with the Sunnyside Shower Project, actually, who Jess Moran spoke on their behalf earlier. I am the one of the I'm the homeless employee working for them at the moment. I was camping outside and I started volunteering with them because I got my showers there and then just decided that, hey, why not? I'll spend some more time there. It turned into, they were approved for a small grant to pay me a little bit. And they're requesting more money for me, and they're requesting more money for more toiletries, extreme weather gear for the homeless, and even the potential for further services like help with paperwork and doctor's appointments and arranging transportation. And I very much support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. And I believe that would be all. I do not see any other hands. So I'll pass it over to you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Jeremiah, and thank you so much to everyone who provided testimony and information tonight. We're going to move to the part of our agenda where we will hear closing remarks from our commissioners and mayor. So first, we will hear from Commissioner Ryan.
There we go. Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank everyone who was in attendance tonight. You covered a lot of ground. I am noticing more of a theme around climate action, like really wanting to see action from in this budget towards climate justice in general. But it was a constant theme tonight. I also want to acknowledge some other things. There was a lot of themes around community safety, not surprising. And then also, of course, around homelessness services, which we are in partnership with the county. As you know, they have services at the county and we partner with them to play our role. So thank you for that. Some other themes that I just want to like pay attention to the themes. There was a lot around the small grants program, and that was something I want to dig into further. So you had a big presence here tonight. Congratulations. And is there anything else? I know my colleagues who will go after me will have more time to listen to me fumble through what I thought I heard, and you guys will let me know what you all heard. But anyway, those were just some things that stuck out. And there was especially in community safety, there was more attention given to, I think, BOEC and call times and responsiveness than I've heard in the past proportionally. So anyway, just know that it really helps when you show up and you get in front of us, especially at this moment in the process. You really strengthened my commitment to investing in these solutions to support, for me, our homeless neighbors, next steps to community safety, and advancing the work to ensure our economic recovery. And I also noticed there were people that I think are many in the city which hold interest in our economic recovery and climate action. So they're not two different opposing viewpoints. And I think Portland can really lead the nation, not only in a green economy, but in having the courage to connect the dots between the two. And so that was refreshing to hear people that I thought were starting to speak just about economic recovery in a more traditional, maybe business sense, but then really mixed in their commitment to climate justice. I will be requesting additional American Rescue Plan funds to help Portlanders receive services on the ground that lead to safe and stable housing. I'm seeking to use the federal funds to address our housing crisis and create greater opportunities to close the racial equity gap in home ownership. So it's also great to hear people speak to the importance of land banking, why we can, so we can preserve the hope for really building generational wealth. Working to fund community safety investments we agreed upon during the Portland Police Association and Department of Justice negotiations, which included data management for body-worn cameras. These investments are really crucial as we transform our community safety. And finally, I am personally going to be advocating really hard as we continue to tackle our permitting improvement, our permit improvement work. This is something that's plagued our city for decades. And I'm really noticing it right now, even in this emergency, when it comes to shelters and getting affordable housing going, how often that delays the process, and time is money. And so it makes it more expensive for these very important services to be built. So it's a very fundamental system improvement that we need at our city. And so I just want to again thank everybody for being here this evening. We will be able to respond to these community needs the more we keep it tight and keep it together. I'm grateful to work with a council that's very focused on these priorities. And I so look forward to the continuation of these conversations. And I hope that those of you that are listening tonight and even testify will follow along, and we'll see you at the ones coming up in May. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Hardesty.
I want to add my thanks to folks who showed up and stayed through the entire time so that your voice could be included in this process. And I have to tell you, I'm really kind of thrilled about a lot of what I heard tonight. Started talking about land land banking, land that governments already own. I've been talking about that for a while. It seems crazy for us to sell land we already own and then bank for a public benefit. I was happy to hear people really wanting to support the Healthy Business Program that really helps small businesses continue to stay in business during the height of COVID. And I absolutely heard over and over about the long wait times. And I'm hopeful that the investments that we've made in a 311 system will divert calls. I am hopeful that with Portland Street Response being citywide, again, calls will be diverted to the appropriate people. And I've heard it almost evenly split between people who think we need more police and people who think we need less. Clearly, we have 100 funded positions that are already funded that we have not been able to hire for. And I'm excited about hiring a training dean, getting the body cam policy in place, and then getting body cams, and then really continuing to think about public safety from every single bureau at the city of Portland. The Bureau of Transportation has played a major role in helping to reduce violence, and every single bureau in the city can do likewise. And so I appreciate folks coming out, heard loud and clear about the climate and how we need to reduce greenhouse gases and single mile vehicle travel. And that's been a priority for me, as well as reducing deaths by automobile, which is almost on par with deaths by gun violence. So this city has a lot of work to do with one-time money. And I hope we are very thoughtful as we invest some of these dollars now as we prepare for the long road of recovery. And again, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Commissioner Maps.
I too would like to thank everyone who testified today. This evening, I heard calls for this council to make creative investments to combat houselessness and housing insecurity. We heard some frankly chilling testimony about the need to improve our 911 service. We also heard numerous calls to make investments in public safety. And we heard calls to invest more in violence prevention programs. I actually think those two things are not incompatible. In fact, I think they're necessary to move forward on that. Of course, there was a chorus of calls for this council to take action against climate change. And we were urged to support the small grants program over the neighborhood coalition offices. I support all of these goals too, and I hope those projects are reflected in the final budget adopted by this council. Thank you.
Terrific. Now we'll hear from Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you. First, I'd like to appreciate the team at the Budget Office for setting up another process that enables us to listen to community. I also want to thank each one of you in the community who testified tonight. And as I mentioned at the last budget forum, this is my second year participating. Because up until a couple of years ago, I was one of you all providing testimony at various budget hearings as a nonprofit director. So I'm very clear about what my job is here tonight, and really taking in what you're saying, taking in what you prioritized, and also thoughtfully considering your comments as we make our decisions around the budget. The bottom line is that we need to budget in a way that upholds the values that we've heard tonight and that are aligned with our council priorities, and also meaningfully engage with you all as we do that. And a few of the themes that were recurring that I heard, supporting tree canopy and also tree maintenance, investing in gun violence prevention and Portland Street Response, increasing police response and 911 emergency response times, continuing support service for the houseless community, and also investments in land banking, And then also the need to continue the small grants programs in the community. And then finally, urgently addressing climate action and emissions reduction through investments in mitigation and resiliency. And these are all really important and priority areas for us. And also just want to call out that those who've outlined the need to make more meaningful investments in climate change and tree canopy. I strongly agree with you, and I appreciate your advocacy tonight. And we'll do what we can to make sure that we make meaningful investments. So in the meantime, I look forward to continuing to do my part to bring what I've heard tonight into our more into our budget dialogues with all of my colleagues moving forward. So thanks again to everyone for coming out tonight.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Mayor Wheeler.
All right. Well, thank you again, everyone. Jen, thank you for doing a great job as usual facilitating. Director Kennard, thanks to you and the budget team for doing a good one-on-one overview, and also just for a lot of the work that you do behind the scenes to make these budget work sessions effective. I also want to thank our friends at Open Signal for making this broadly available to the public and making all the technology that goes into this seem seamless. And I know that's a lot harder than it looks. So thanks to you good folks at Open Signal. I especially want to thank all of those who testified tonight. I appreciate your time, your feedback, and your thoughtful suggestions. Like my colleagues, I heard a number of important themes tonight around community safety. That continues to be a significant priority for this community. And I think all of us have heavy hearts based on what happened yesterday, another shooting. This one took one life and injured 3 teenagers. And I think all of us, our hearts go out to the families and the individuals who are impacted by that. We're all seeking good solutions to that. When it comes to gun violence specifically, I heard commentary around the Office of Violence Prevention, investing dollars in community organizations that work with people who are impacted by gun violence. We also heard calls for more police on the streets. We also heard calls for less police on the streets and alternatives, including improving our non-emergency 311 call system, supporting alternatives like the Portland Street Response and other strategies. This is really where the rubber meets the road in terms of prioritizing, which is acknowledging that nobody has a monopoly on the truth, and our community does not necessarily have a consensus. My personal view is it's a both-and proposition. We need police, and we need community-based approaches, and we need alternatives, and we need a functioning 911 and 311 system. And that's why I have supported all of that programming historically, and why I would expect to continue to support that as I evaluate the proposed budget going forward. We heard a lot around homelessness. I was very impressed, frankly, to hear firsthand accounts from people, including individuals who are homeless, working on important projects around hygiene and community support and livability. That will obviously continue to be a focus of our budgeting process going forward. The environment, climate action, making sure that we're doing what we can to address some of the issues around street trees, that becomes important. We heard more today than we heard the other day about the small grants program and the importance of that. And I want to be crystal clear, I absolutely support the small grants program, and you should expect to see that reflected in my budget. Thank you. So thank you for those who shared those thoughts. Now a dose of wet blanket. Before we close, I'd be seriously remiss if I didn't just take a moment to note the reality that we have scarce resources that we are working to allocate over the coming fiscal year. We will have to make choices amongst good ideas. Just to give you an example, through the bureaus and the city council, my colleagues, we've received about 4 times over the forecasted available resource. approximately 4 times. So we're going to have to do a significant culling of our priorities before we agree on the final budget. But all of us on the council working hard to build a balanced budget that meets the urgent needs within each of the council's shared priority areas: homelessness, community safety, economic recovery, all with an overview of thinking about encouraging equity in our investments and achieving our climate action goals. I want to be clear that I've taken lots of notes, as I know my colleagues have. The input will guide our decisions as we work to finalize the budget and as I work to finalize the proposed budget in the weeks to come. Again, thanks everybody for sharing what I know is a busy night for everybody with all of us here today. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jen to close us out. Thanks, Jen.
Great, thank you. Just want to give a final plug before we conclude for the evening for our future opportunities to be able to provide your testimony and your information to the City Council and to the Mayor. Our next session is going to be on Wednesday, May 5th, and that will be from 6 to 8 p.m. That's the Mayor's proposed budget hearing. After that, on Thursday, May 11th, from 2 to 5 p.m. will be the approved budget hearing. At any time, if you want to provide information or testimony to the City Council, you can do so on the website at portlandoregon.gov/CBO, or you can email testimony to budgetcomment@portlandoregon.gov. And all of the information that you send over will be provided to council offices. And so I will hand it back to Mayor Wheeler to adjourn us for the evening. Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a great evening. We are adjourned.